Hey guys, Christian here, and I'm going round two after doing the first video. I was using some software that hadn't been updated, so it didn't let me download it, which is always fun. Beginning of the semester issues. But here we are, week one, reading the Old Testament. I hope you guys are excited and ready to go. So, because we all are remote here, I am remote, hanging out in Pasadena, California, and I'm just going to go over briefly the class and then your week one assignments. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me or Facebook me, and we'll go from there. But I'm already here in week one, but to give you a little bit of a heads up, if you log into Blackboard and then go into your Reading the Old Testament class, you will probably and should be taken to the announcement page. I'll make another announcement. Well, it's the first announcement here at this point. This is probably all that you're going to see. And then what I want you to do is to go to the syllabus and schedule for the class. All right. See that right there? So a couple things to note. I think I mentioned this in the orientation, but you can do a couple things. To see the syllabus and schedule, you can just simply scroll through everything you would ever want to know of the course. All the details you need are right there. All the assignments, you go all the way down, and you'll see a summary of all the assessments. This is how we get to your grade, and then this is the grading scale. But if you're still a little old school and you want to print out syllabus, there you go. Printable syllabus right there. It's opening. Looks like any other syllabus you've ever seen. The information is not different. It's the exact same on that. Okay. You can also print up a schedule. The schedule is right there as well. So the schedule is kind of cool because it has everything divided for each week. So you can see here the reading you have to do this week, and then here's your assignment that you have to do in week one, class intro, assignment 1.1, and then begin working on 4.2. The other thing that's cool about that is you see there's lesson objectives for each week of your 8-week class. So you're seeing clearly what was designed for you to accomplish objectively in week one. And then how do the assignments tie into that? So the class introduction ties back into the first objective, and assignment 1.1 ties back into 1 and 2 of the lesson objectives, and so forth. The discussion board details is down there for you, and we have little check marks for you to, if you want to print that up and check off what you've done that week. It's a nice little resource. You don't have to use it, but it's there for you if you want it. So I do want to go down here all the way at the bottom and just make sure you understand how this course works. What are the assessments? Let's get right down to it, right? It looks like a lot, right? But here's the thing. You have 8 weeks in this course. So this course was designed for you to have something to work on as far as an assignment goes each week. So they're not all major papers. Some of them are more just like verifying that you're doing the work and you're understanding the main dynamics. So something like Old Testament thematic analysis or covenant enforcement worksheet, those are going to be pretty straightforward, and we're probably not going to give you a lot of feedback on that. If you're doing it right, you're probably going to get full credit, and I'll probably post an example of a perfect assignment, what we're looking for at the end of that week, and that should pretty much clarify things for you. You should get full credit. There's going to be other things. Even this first assignment is a little bit of a research type paper, and may take a little bit of getting used to for you, but we'll give you some feedback on that. But you'll notice these are not worth a ton of your grade. None of your papers, notice that there's no quizzes or tests, just little assignments. Some of them kind of work out to be more like quizzes because you're basically just doing little worksheets on any given week, but nothing's worth more than 5 or 10% of your grade. So, I mean, you can bomb a couple of these and get 50s or 60s, and it's not even going to really hurt your grade all that much. Now, hopefully none of you will do that, but just so you're aware that this isn't like not any part of your grade is riding on one assignment. Now, the biggest part of your entire grade is the discussion board, so you want to take those seriously. That's 25% of your grade is just doing those, and if you're putting the effort in, those are also not right or wrong answers. Those are effort grades based on the fact that you're doing your reading. We can see that you're doing your reading, and that you're really chewing on and processing the material. If you're not getting full marks there, that's your own fault. Okay, so that's how the course works. That's how it's graded. I'm not going to go over all the assignments now. Each week will tell you both what assignments are due, so what you should do that week, and then if you need to work ahead at all, what assignments you should be working ahead on. So I'm only going to go over the first couple assignments this week, and if you scroll up, you'll see assignment 1.1. I'm going to go into week 1 to go over that, but I just want to also mention briefly the books, because there's been a couple of people that have been confused about that. So the books for this course, you only have to buy 2 books, the book by Bayless and the book by Duval. The third book by Spencer, James, and Russell Meek is not out yet. James Spencer is actually the dean of Moody Distance Learning, and is a very, very intellectual and thoughtful scholar on the Old Testament, and he's working on a book called Old Testament Theology that we're using for this course. It is not published yet, so we're going to give you free PDFs of the relevant parts of the book that you need to read. So you don't need to buy it. It'll be put in the Blackboard into the sections that you need it. All the other readings that you need for the course are also just posted right into Blackboard for you. So you don't need to go through and freak out about all of this. Some of these are supplemental. You don't have to read. Others are going to be included in your required reading, but they're going to be free. You just click on it in the course. Hope that makes sense. And same thing with the videos and that sort of thing. Now, in terms of the objectives for this course, let me briefly go through those. You'll see here, first, analyze Old Testament genres according to their genre distinctive. What we're not doing in this course is having you be an expert on the Old Testament, or that you have memorized the Old Testament, or that you've even read the entire Old Testament. We don't actually care that you have gotten all the content, or that you know all the stories, or that you know the order of the Old Testament books of the Bible, or how many they were, or whatever else. No one cares if you know all of that. It just sounds really cool in Sunday school. So what we're really concerned about is that you understand the different literary genres that make up the Old Testament, and those distinctives and why they matter. So the prophetic books, what's the difference? What makes a prophetic book? Why is it a prophetic book? And how do you look at a prophetic book differently than you would a poetic book or a book of the law, and that sort of thing? So we're going to go over that in this course, and then we're going to look at the various themes that compose the Old Testament. Not all the themes, but some of the major ones that span the different genres. So there are themes of the Old Testament that span the poetic books, the prophetic books, the law, and so forth. So we're gonna show you the relationship between those themes throughout the Old Testament, and then finally utilize historical background to interpret Old Testament text. So that means that you're going to need to be able to look at a book or a passage and understand what historical background is relevant for me to make some sort of decision on how to interpret this text. So when you don't understand the context of the historical background, you don't understand how to take what the author is saying and filter it through what was going on in the background of their historical context that affects the way you use that text. That's everything. You can avoid most of the mistakes people make in interpreting and applying a passage by simply looking at the historical background. So that's one of the things you're going to do with the Old Testament this semester. So again, we're giving you tools in order to, let's say we never get into the book of Malachi, which we won't really. But when you are in the book of Malachi, or talking about the prophetic books in general, we're going to hopefully give you some skills that you're going to be able to take with you that are going to help you study that book if you've never studied it before, and what you are learning in this class should translate then into any Old Testament study that you do. So finally, then we want to identify the ways in which the Old Testament scriptures form oneself and one's community of faith. So that's really the application piece, right? We want to make sure that we're getting some head knowledge, we're doing some solid study, but are we able to actually use it at all into anything that matters in life? So we are gonna give you some outlets to try to process and reflect and implement things into yourself and community, and that's the main objectives of the course. So let's go to week 1 here and go over what to do this week. Alright, so the title of this week's lesson is Creation. So we are going to start kind of at the beginning of Scripture, but it's not for the purpose of just reading, Genesis this week. The purpose is to do these things. Five objectives for this week. So we have course objectives and then lesson objectives. The lesson objectives this week, we want you to Describe the theological significance of the creation account. Identify the features of narrative. So this is a narrative genre that you're looking at in Genesis, in various Old Testament creation texts, which mostly are in Genesis, but we'll refer to them, in other places as well. We want you to identify the features of narrative. So what does that even mean? What is a narrative, and why looking at Genesis or the creation account, why does understanding that it's a narrative impact the way we look at that and understand that text? 3, develop a theology. Theology being the study of God. Develop a theology of creation that informs Christian practice. So how does your study of God, in terms of us studying what happened in creation, how does that affect the way we live out our Christian life? And then 4, analyze differences between the Genesis creation account and other ancient Near Eastern creation accounts. That's really what your assignment 1.1 will be about. And then finally, develop select theological themes from Scripture and apply it. Okay, so you're reading this week. You're going to be reading out of Bayless. That's your textbook, one of your textbooks, chapter 1. So you should have already bought that, and that's the page numbers you need to read out of. Then, like I mentioned, we're going to give you a PDF for the reading out of the Spencer and Meek book. So you just click on it. Click right there. Oh, and there's your little happy friend, your PDF. So you just read that, and you're set this week with your reading. We have additional required reading this week, and that is also PDF. So you also just click those 3. See, and that pops out. It's going to load, but the point is that's your. Those 3 are also required reading, as well as the Bible. You notice that we've got 3 different biblical passages for you to read this week. One out of Genesis, one out of Job, one out of Psalm. So again, we're not having you read straight through the Bible. We're having you read 3 different genres and sections of those genres that we can teach from and give you some skills out of. So this is quality, not quantity, and that's your reading for the week. At the end of that, you do want to fill out this reading report. So when you're done with your reading, you click on that link right here, and you fill out how much of the reading you've done, and that gives you credit for the class. It's very important that you do that and not forget it. All right. The assignment 1.1. It's called Comparing Genesis 1 to 2 and the Enuma Elish. All right. So scholars of the ancient Near East have for a long time been drawing parallels between Genesis 1 and 2 and the Enuma Elish epic. So there's an ancient Near Eastern storyline that corresponds closely with the Genesis 1 to 2 account. But to what extent is this true? And even if there are parallels in these 2 literary works, what theological or doctrinal differences are there between these 2 texts? So you're going to write a 3 to 4 page paper, no less than 3, no more than 4 pages. We have a lot of people to grade. So less than 3 means you're not doing enough work. More than 4 means you're doing too much writing and not enough focusing on simply answering the question. And Times New Roman double space, 12-point font. Don't mess it up. And basically I want you to do this. Take these 3 questions, these 3 bullet points, and then you're going to put them in bold and put them in your paper. So you first put this one in your paper in bold, and then you just answer it underneath that as a paper. Then when you get done with that, you would cut and paste that one, put that in your paper, and then answer underneath that. Same thing with that, okay? The first half of the paper, examine instances of potential textual similarity or parallels using citations from Enuma Elish in Genesis 1 to 2, which means what? Okay, in this first section, you are going to be looking at what are the similarities or parallels between these 2 accounts. So explain whether or not you believe these similarities to be coincidental or of some consequence. In other words, you will study each passage for similar details. So what you're going to do, look at these two passages, or these 2 readings, the Enuma Elish in Genesis 1 to 2. What are the similarities? So one example is, in both accounts, you've got humans that are created from the earth, or from dirt. So that's not necessarily interpretational. That's simply saying, okay, both of these stories mention people being created from the dirt. So you're going to analyze that. That's textual similarity or parallel. And you're going to say where in Enuma Elish it says that, where in Genesis does it talk about that. And then you're going to explain whether or not you believe these similarities are coincidence, like they just happened to be kind of studying the same thing, or is there more to it than that? If there's more to it than that, talk about it. So you're going to be studying these passages and really looking for the similar details and processing what significance that might have. All right, that's the first half of the paper. Then in the second half, you're going to examine the theological differences. That means more like how do these differences of the papers play into our understanding of God, who we are, and that sort of thing. For example, in what ways does Genesis and Enuma Elish teach different things about how we should think about the history and value of the earth? Our understanding of God, who He is, of humanity, and the relationship between God and humanity, and sin, etc. So when you look at the two accounts, when you're reading Enuma Elish and you're reading Genesis, if you were not reading Genesis, for instance, how would someone that was reading Enuma Elish understand God, or the history of the earth, or the value of the earth, humanity, our relationship with God, sin? So how do those theological specifics compare to one another when you read the two passages? That's different from just saying, yeah, they both mention, mankind being formed from the earth. So the first part, you're kind of saying, here is how they are similar when you read through them. And the second part is like, here are the differences of how this pans out theologically when you study them. Then finally, we want you to conclude with a brief. Oops, am I still recording? Yes. Okay, finally we want you to conclude with a brief paragraph summarizing the theological significance of the creation account, especially in relation with other ancient Near Eastern creation accounts. So, in terms of the creation account, when we study God, and this is a issue debated among Christians, so we understand that this is not just like necessarily a hard fast answer that you have to say X, Y, and Z about. Boom. But at the same time, we're looking from a basic kind of biblical understanding of the creation account, and then, whoops, what did I just do there? Hopefully I didn't just X out. Am I still recording? Yes, I am. Sorry about that. My computer is wigging out. Sorry. So you're concluding with a paragraph that summarizes the significance of the creation account in relation to other ancient Near Eastern creation accounts. The Enuma Elish is one of those, but are you able to find some more? Are there other instances where in the ancient Near East or in biblical history, what were the other ideas circulating regarding how the world and humankind were created? Does that make sense? So this isn't the long part, this is a short part, but it at least shows that you are finding resources that demonstrate that you kind of have some sort of understanding now after doing some research of what those beliefs were in the ancient Near East. So it does require some research. You want to include at least 2 citations of reputable and recent academic resources. So that does not include Wikipedia and creationmuseum.org and Constable's Notes. Those are easily accessible online resources that are helpful and good for many things, and you can even use them in some ways when you're doing a paper. It's just that those are not the academic resources that you would use for your bibliography, for your citations. So make sure that you are using good, solid academic resources. If you don't know how to use those, I'm going to make a little link later showing you how to use the @Love Religion database that you have access to now as a Moody student, and that will help you very quickly and easily find resources to use for this sort of thing. So you have plenty of stuff to do for the time being. I'll make other videos later this week to show you how to do that. But that's essentially your assignment 1.1. Assignment 4.2, while we tell you to work ahead, there's not a whole lot for you to necessarily do at this point besides to start thinking about it, okay? So your first step of this 4.2 assignment is due in week 4, so nothing for this is due until week 4, and that's just your summary. So it's going to be a 1-page document that's going to include what your theme is, your thesis, and a bibliography of resources you plan to consult. So really what you want to be working towards here is coming up with, start to think about, not coming up with, but start thinking about what your theme might be just based on what you're reading and so forth is at this point. We'll talk more about that in recent weeks. There's not really anything for you to do. Simply just start thinking about it, be aware of it. This assignment's not actually due until the end of the course, the week 8. It's that final essay on your Old Testament thematic analysis. So that's probably one of your bigger assignments in general, which is why we want you to start thinking about it. So not really much for you to do this week. You're not going to come up with your theme probably this week, but we do want you to be aware of it and to to start thinking about it. So I'll cover that more in the coming weeks. So for this week, your class introductions, you would just introduce yourself. You can use the same class intro that you did in your other classes that you're in right now. While all of you are FYOP students of some kind, not all of you are in the exact same classes. Most of you are, but some of you, all of you are going to be in your classes with different students. So the 20-some of you that are in this class are going to be with 20-some different students. Some are the same from this class, some different in your other classes. So you can use the same introduction. We won't be doing this, at least in my class. I'll probably not have you do intros the same way next class that we have in New Testament, reading the New Testament. But either way, please post that this week. You'll get, marks for that, for doing that. And then the discussion board. You have to do your reading first, so I'll talk about this later as well. But do your reading, specifically in Bayless and the Genesis account, and then your discussion board is going to be on this question here. So we'll talk about that later this week. That'll be due Friday night, the first post. Then you'll have 2 more posts that are going to be due by Monday. So at this point, just start doing your reading, and I'll make another post about how to do the discussion board later this week. And should be good. I think that's enough talking for now. So start your reading, start having fun. Feel free to message me if you have any questions whatsoever at this point, but there will be more clarification coming. Hope you guys have a great time as you start this course, and I'm here to help. So love to you all, and see you soon.